who's at home dependent upon it. All right. So we're going to start in Matthew chapter 8 this morning. Matthew chapter 8, just kind of thinking about this situation. They had known him, but the question they said, who is this man? So it's kind of the question I want us to think about this morning, because we can sometimes still be around Christ for a while, but still be amazed at what he can do, can't we? He is definitely capable of anything. But everyone has their own opinion about Jesus, but not every opinion is right. You know, some people think they know who Christ is. Some know him as just a baby in a manger that they think about on Christmas. Some just about Easter time. But as we look into the word of who is he to us, not just a teacher. I know some people that all they believe about Jesus was that he was a great prophet. You know, was a good man that taught good things, and that's all he was. He just was a good, made a good impact on society. If we would listen to his teachings, it would be good. But that's all he was just a good teacher back then. It's all he is to them. Throughout gospel, people are always asking the question, well, who's this man? And that's what I want us to have. We really ask ourselves, who is this man? For a while, we all go through stages and grow. And sometimes you hear people that grow up in church, and they are taught, they learn, and then when they become of age and they get out on their own, then they want to go searching and they want to find out what they believe. And first few times I heard that as I aged through that, some of my peers, when I reached a stage of some of my peers, then they started going out and they were going to find what they believed. And it bothered me. I was like, well, what do you mean, what you believe? You were taught, and I thought it was a bad thing. But now looking back, although some of them made bad decisions, I still think it's a good thing. All of us need to come to know who is Christ to us. We need to know who he is to us. Hopefully you come to the same conclusion you was taught, but still yet you need to know who is Christ. And so who is Christ? Who is this man? And in Matthew chapter 8, verse 23, we're just going to read 26. Not going to read 23. It's going to read just 26 and 27. In your home studies, read the entire encounter. But we got food back there. I don't want to let it cool off. So let us read verse 26 of Matthew 8. And he saith unto them, why are you fearful, O ye of little faith? Then he arose and rebuked the winds and the sea, and there was a great calm. 27. But the men marveled, saying, what manner of man is this, that even the winds and the sea obeyed him? Now his disciples had already been following him. They'd already watched Jesus heal. They had watched him teach. They had watched him perform other miracles, yet this violent storm, that was on a different level. He's helped do this and do that, and he's healed, he's taught truths, he's solved problems, and he's done miracles. But this storm in the middle of the Sea of Galilee, that's another thing. That's Mother Nature. That's not this. That's big stuff. But Jesus simply spoke, and the wind and the waves obeyed him. So the disciples were the one that left asking the question after they saw the storm calmed. The disciples are the one that walked away asking, what manner of man is this? And have we not even come to serve the Lord and know the Lord? And even after our years' time of walking with God, have you still not seen him do some mighty things and some impressive stuff? We're like, wow, he's just an amazing God. He is in total, ultimate control. Jesus has power over everything that terrifies us. Because when they saw him do the miracles, when they saw him feeding the hungry, they saw him healing the lame man. They saw him doing this and doing that. But overall, other than the hunger, what had they witnessed him do that had directly impacted them? Because everything changes when it directs you personally, don't it? When it affects you personally, that's when it changes. And who was the one in the ship? Who was the one in the boat that was being tossed around? Who was about to get drowned out in the middle of the Sea of Galilee? The disciples themselves. So when it gets personal, things change on us. But that was when they realized, wow, What kind of man is this? The presence of God and the pressures of the world, they're not the same. The presence of God can always overcome the pressures of the world. What kind of a man is he? Miracles reveal his identity, but it also reveals our trust and confidence and our awe. Marvelous is his name, as it says in other times. But if creation obeys him, even creation obeys him, we should as well, shouldn't we? We should listen. We should pay attention. Let's look at another passage in John, because sometimes we get in our mind of who Christ is. Again, that's the question I'm asking, and I want you to look at a few examples, but I want you to examine yourself. And by the end of the service and going into this today and this week, I want you to pay attention. Who is Christ to you? What kind of a manner is he? What is your thoughts about Christ? What is your expectations of Christ? And how are they much different than others? And sometimes we can be just as biased as anyone else, and I share this as a confessional. Not saying I'm right by no means, quite contrary, but just to share leading into this. Sometimes get lots of phone calls. Spam calls have definitely increased on my line. I don't know about yours. Definitely getting more spam calls and more unsolicited phones rings and answer, and I don't want to talk to these people. And actually anymore, most of them end up being AI. If you notice, the diction and the punctuation has improved, because it's AI talking to us now more than it's not. But you remember the time when you answer the phone and you don't understand what they're saying because it's more of an Indian persuasion, more of a, Middle East persuasion conversation, dialect and accent. And I don't know how many of those I've hung up on. Don't even want to talk to them. Once I hear the Indian accent, I just hang up. I don't want to talk to them. Don't want to talk to them. But I can be kind of biased about that in reality, because again, may not think much about them. There's some that we may not pay close of attention to. How excited and how scared would we kind of a little bit be if we had a Middle Eastern come visit and come to church and sit there? Would we not kind of have a few thoughts, a little bit of, would you be in total control of your thoughts? Would there be some stereotyping going on? I go through it. I ain't gonna say we all, maybe you guys are better than me. I actually hope you are. But think about that as we read here what Philip saith and Nathanael says in John 1:45. Philip findeth Nathanael and saith unto him, We have found him of whom Moses in the law and the prophets did write, Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph. Can you just hear the excitement in Philip's tone as he's talking about this? How excited Philip is. And Nathanael, can you hear the disdain in his comment then in verse 46? And Nathanael saith to him, Can there any good thing come out of Nazareth? Philip saith to him, Well, come and see. What a great response. What an appropriate reply back to Nathanael. Instead of arguing about it, well, yeah, there can be. You're just being closed-minded and you're being judgmental and you're being this, the direction that conversation normally ends up going today when someone has a ism, one of these racisms or xenophobism, or have one of these isms going on. And instead of the debate about it, Philip didn't enter into the debate with Nathanael. He just simply said, well, just come and see. Just come and check him out. See what you think about him. But the whole thing of who do you think Jesus is? Would you have the same thought of who Jesus is if you truly saw him? In history speaking, does any of us really think the version of Christ that we as Americans acknowledge, do you think is that what he looked like? The Jesus we see in The Chosen, do you think that was a good casting choice? We watch movies, biopics. We'll watch movies about historical people where we have pictures of them, and sometimes they do a pretty wonderful job casting people, don't they? Like, he really looks the part. He really pulled off that. He really played well. But I can't remember the actor's name that played Jesus in Chosen right now off my head. I watch him on Facebook, pretty cool guy. But his name skips me right now, not important for the message. But do you think they did a good job casting him? How do we know? What does Jesus really look like? Do you think he looked more Middle Eastern than he did than American? Think what is the complexion again, or what do you know? there's quite a large chance that we would have the same mentality of Nathanael if we saw the real Christ that walked then, because of our mentalities, our stereotypes, our prejudice that are just naturally there. So who is Jesus? Nathanael didn't even care. Can't be no one good coming from there. But Philip challenged him and said, well, just come and see. Verse 47, so Jesus saw Nathanael coming to him, and saith of him, behold, an Israelite indeed, in whom is no guile. Nathanael saith unto him, whence knowest thou me? Jesus answered and said unto him, before that Philip called thee, when thou wast under the fig tree, I saw thee. Nathanael answered and saith unto him, Rabbi, thou art the Son of God, thou art the King of Israel. So now all of a sudden Nathanael knows. Does Nathanael make this statement, thou art the Son of God, thou art the King of Israel, because Philip told him to say it? Philip said, hey, we have found him that was in the law and the prophets, Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph. Philip told him who Christ was. Now Nathanael knows who Christ was because he saw him himself. So it's important to know who is Christ to us. Jesus knows every one of our hearts. He knows everything we've all done. He knows us well. If we only knew him as well as we knew us, then we would have a great relationship with Christ. Because what is the true open, I share so much, relationship is what's important. Relationship over religion. Relationship over legalism. We have to have a relationship with Christ. And that relationship then will bleed in and come into our life, and it will be evidence in everything that we say and do. But a relationship should be two-way. Both spouses should know each other equally, right? The spouse should know their spouse both ways. He knows us. We should know him. So again, the question of who is this man? Well, come and see. Come and see. Let's go to John 4, the Samaritan woman. And very much she does the same thing. She delivers the same message to everybody else. Just come and see. The invitation. Sometimes we spend so much time trying to tell people who Christ is instead of telling them who he is to us and then inviting them to see for themselves. You know, we should be inviting people. We ought to be encouraging people to find out themselves, to double check. It's not very good if we feel so insecure that we have to tell people something and then just tell them to take our word for it. Do you feel challenged if someone wants to prove you, wants to check you? You know, sometimes I do. Sometimes I can be challenged if someone wants to check me. I share work quite a bit, and Chris does, but that's kind of a relatable thing. God's always teaching me through my work. And when I go through my semi-annual audits and inspections, sometimes it can really bother me because the auditor does different things to double check me. And one of the most offensive one that I found one time was when he pulled his tape measure out and he measured the length of a wall. It kind of bothered me. If you don't think I can read a tape measure, then I don't need this job at all. If you think you have to double check me reading a tape measure and writing the number down, then I found that offensive. I know how to walk across. Oh, that's 20 foot. You know, because we're told to round, and to go with this, we're told to round to the nearest foot. So it's not even the precision of the inches or the partial inches. We're supposed to round to the nearest foot. So 6-inch variance, you don't think I can? I found it offensive. And there are times, if I'm not careful, when it comes to pastoring and talking, and someone asks me a question and I answer it, it's like, well, what verse is that in? Like, well, why ask me if you're going to just double check me? You know, just find your own research, you know. But we lead people to Christ. Who is Christ to me? And then I need to encourage people to find out who Christ is to you. Don't be so misthreatened. I love Brother Carlton. It's been years ago. The last time he was here, it was 80. And when they came through and he stayed with us, and he and I was having a conversation, he was visiting. He's talking about what it was like in Japan as a missionary and going through the stuff. And he taught English classes over there. And he shared an example of a lady he was teaching English to. And he used that as his opportunity, teaching English to be a minister. and to be the missionary. And he talked about Christ. Well, he had this one of she was raised with in the other Hinduism or Buddhism. I don't know which other religion she was raised in, an extreme other religion. And she was on her own now, trying to learn English, and she was in her version of seeking for the truth. She was taught very other religion, and she was seeking her truth. And she was asking Brother Carlton, how do I know who's real? You tell me about Jesus. But my family tell me about, again, I can't remember which other God it was, but how do I know who is true? And instead of bashing the other false god, the other religion, instead of telling her so much more what he already had of what Christ was, he gave her a simple challenge. He said, just go home tonight and just pray to both gods and see which one answers you. Just go ahead and pray to the God of your parents. And then pray to Jesus I'm telling you about until listen and see which one answers you. And then he came back and said the next lesson, she wanted to know more about Christ because she felt like Christ answered her. She met Christ. So instead of him trying to prove them wrong and prove him right, he just challenged her, well, who's Christ to you? Just whichever one be true, answer me, seek out. He answered. So again, we need to introduce people to Christ, but come see a man told me all about myself. We find in John 4 and verse 28, this Samaritan woman here, after she drew the water, she'd expected just another ordinary day, but she met Christ, and he told her all things. He knew her past. He knew all about her. Verse 28, the woman then left her water pot and went her way into the city, and saith to the men, come, see a man which told me all things that ever I did. Is not this the Christ? Then they went out of the city and came unto him. So how did she go? Hey, come meet the Christ, or come meet his Jesus. She didn't tell them everything and try to convince them and argue with them. She simply said, come see a man which wants us, he invites us. So where are we at with our walk? Where is the relationship with Christ ourselves? Do we know who he is to us? Have we been challenged to ask, what kind of a man is this? Because he will far exceed your best expectation of him. The disciples walked away. Peter, James, and John, they were fishermen. They were with their dad. They walked away from their occupation, walked away from their family. They were following Christ, and they still was impressed and didn't know enough about Christ. Like, what kind of a man can do this? Some came to Jesus carrying their shame. This woman here did. She knew of her past. He forgave her and loved her anyway. Have you experienced that with Christ? He loves you no matter what you've done. It's just coming to him now. So in Matthew chapter 11, Jesus sends an invitation to all those that are weary, all the burdens, not just the perfect people. He knows all about all of us. And the Samaritan woman was one that technically shouldn't have been talking to. By the political standards of the times, he shouldn't have been talking to her. But he was, because she needed him. He came for all. She had a very sinful, shameful past that was avoided. As we remember watching it through The Chosen, there was a reason she came at that time of the day to the well to draw water when she did, because she wasn't accepted when everybody else was there. But he loved her anyway. Jesus invites everyone. In Matthew 11 and 28, we'll count this invitation, just as Philip told Nathanael, and just as the woman told the men, Jesus tells us, verse 28, come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn of me. For I am meek and lowly in heart, and you shall find rest unto your souls. For my yoke is easy, and my burden is light. But think about 28, the invitation, come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden. Who does not fall in that category, honestly? We can look at some people's life outwardly, especially if we pay attention to social media, which we should not. But if you pay attention to someone's life outwardly, especially what they want you to see, some people look like they've got it made, that their life is full of eat, drink, and be merry, that everything goes well, they're all fine, they have no cares in the world, everything works perfect for them. But is that reality for anybody? Everyone falls in the category, all you that labor and are heavy laden. People that look like they got it gone, if you knew what's going on in their mind, they're worried and stressed and don't know and confused. They're heavy laden. If you're not heavy laden with burdens of heavy physical labor tasks, if you're not heavy laden with financial problems, if you're not heavy laden with burdens of family, you got emotional, you got spiritual. And if all of that is working great, then you've surely got spiritual heaviness on you. Everyone comes under the category to receive the invitation of come unto me inside. I will give you rest, he says, not just sitting down and resting. I have to do a whole lot more physical resting than I used to. Trying to do physical labor, I got to rest more than I used to. And get it done, I just got to sit down more often. But, we're not talking about physical. We're talking about spiritual rest to our souls. He says, take my yoke upon you. And a yoke, as we know, is just to be yoked up, to be united together with him. Salvation begins when we know who Christ is to us, right? When it's a personal experience. Don't take that out of context. Definitely within the church, but there's deeper depth in that. Me and Jesus have our own thing going is not a good statement as a standalone. But within context of everything else, you need to have a personal walk with Jesus. You need to know who he is to you. His invitation was extended to all and to everybody, but every person has to come to their own decision. So in Matthew 27, Pilate knew who Christ was. He had it put on the cross, King of the Jews. He knew he was innocent. Yet instead of following truth, instead of following what he knew, Pilate followed the crowd. His question echoes through us today. Do we try to wash our hands and say, this blood's not on me? Do you think we can do that? Do we have that option? Jesus died upon the cross for whom? For all of us, each and every one of us. Not a one of us has the opportunity to wash our hands and say, his blood's not on me, because it's on all of us. But yet, Pilate was the one he knew, but yet he allowed the crowd to dictate who Christ was. So again, the question this morning, who is this man? Who is Christ to us, to me? Am I allowing what the world says Christ is dictate my thoughts and service? Verse 22 of Matthew 27, Pilate saith unto them, what shall I do then with Jesus, which is called Christ? They all said unto him, let him be crucified. And the governor said, why? What evil hath he done? But they cried out the more, saying, let him be crucified. When Pilate saw that he could prevail nothing, but rather a tumult was made, he took water, washed his hands before the multitude, saying, I am innocent of the blood of this just person. See ye to it. Then answered all the people and said, his blood be on us and on our children. Then released he Barabbas unto them, and when he had scourged Jesus, he delivered him to be crucified. You cannot pass responsibility to someone else. Who Christ is to you, you have to answer that. You answer it now with your life, you're going to answer it later with your life. Either way around, it's going to be your life. Who is Christ to you? And you can't say, well, everybody else wanted to. I just followed the crowd. We don't get to wash our hands and say, well, it's not on me. And that's such a mentality of the world today. I've already referenced my job once. I'll reference it again. Half of my job is covering my tail. Getting this signature, getting that signature, proving I did this, proving I did that. Hey, I didn't do that. Liability is a major thing anymore. You got to be sure that liability doesn't stop on you. Be sure you can put it on somebody else and you can defend yourself and you shall, not me. I didn't do it. It's not what I did. I said this. They did that on it. It's all. You got to have the paperwork right and the documentation right and the pictures right. You got to cover your tail, make sure liability doesn't fall on you. And even then, you got to have insurance to cover it up, make sure that it's covered. Society is so worried about liability and putting it on someone else. Hey, it's not me. Cover your own tail. Pilate tried it here. He washed his hands. Hey, it's not me. You guys do it. It's not me. We don't have that option. We got to know who Christ is for us. And then, if you know who Christ is, but you allow others to persuade you to go against what you know to be true, then the blood of Christ is on you, not as a covering, but as a condemnation. Amen. You're counting it in the flesh. You're going to suffer. You're going to pay. You have to know. Knowing who Christ is but not doing nothing about it is inexcusable. So conviction can get us, but yet we can't say, well, everybody else is doing it. Well, no, why do I got to go to church? Nobody else goes to church. Does that count? Well, why do I got to do that? No one else does that. The crowd, the multitude. Why do you think the scripture says, few there be that find it? Wide's the gate, narrow's the way. Wide's the gate leads to destruction. Narrow's the way leads to Christ. The majority is wrong. The majority of people here were crying, crucify Christ, right? How many of them knew who he was and still were saying crucified? Do you think Pilate was the only one? Talk about the silent majority sometimes today. It's always been that way. I don't think Christ was the only, I don't think Pilate was the only one there and he was an innocent man. I can honestly think if you were to survey the crowd at the time, some of those saying, crucify him, some of them probably knew he was Christ too, but they were more scared of the crowd than they were of that. So who is Christ? Pilate asked the right question, but he didn't accept the right follow through. Luke 23, we find the two thieves on the cross, equally close to Christ, physically, literally here, going through the same stuff, suffering the same thing, but it's we need to come to Christ, and we need to know who he is. Even in the middle of our suffering, we need to know who he is. No one is beyond the grace. In Luke 23, verse 39, and one of the malefactors which were hanged railed on him, saying, if thou be Christ, save thyself and us. Do you think he knew who Christ was? He just was wanting out of the situation himself. He didn't believe who he was. He was only focused on himself. He was only focused on his pain. The key word in his statement was us, don't you think? Save us, save me was his ultimate meaning of that statement. Save me. But the other one answered, rebuking him, saying, dost not thou fear God, seeing thou art in the same condemnation? And we indeed justly, for we received the due reward of our deeds. But this man hath done nothing amiss. And he said unto Jesus, Lord, remember me when thou comest into thy kingdom. And Jesus saith unto him, verily I say unto thee, today shalt thou be with me in paradise. Now, this context, I don't want to chase a rabbit. We got 6 minutes to go. So I don't want to chase a rabbit here. But just to share and comment, he didn't skip baptism. This isn't about another way. What about deathbed confessions? You don't have to. This is none of that. Because baptism was not into effect yet. This man died under the old law, not under the new law. Because the blood of Christ, baptism represents the death, burial, and resurrection of Christ. Amen? Where was Christ at when the guy said this? Hanging on the cross. He hadn't died yet. He hadn't been buried yet. He hasn't raised yet. So baptism has nothing to do with this scenario. But what does have to do with this scenario was the same thing everybody else had to answer. Who is this man? Who is Christ? He knew who Christ was, didn't he? His confession was, this man, indeed, they were justly, verse 41, for we received the due reward of our deeds, but this man hath done nothing amiss. He knew he was the Christ. Then he said unto him, Lord, remember me when thou comest unto thy kingdom. He knew who Christ was. He knew he was Lord. He knew he had a kingdom. He knew he had done nothing wrong. He knew who Christ was, and he knew who he was, a sinner, because he was there rightly. We rightly so. So he had came to the realization, because the two questions, one I'm preaching about this morning, who is Christ? The next best question is, who are you? And this man knew the right answer to both of those. He knew he was a sinner, and he knew Christ was not. He knew Christ was Christ and the Lord and Messiah and King, and he knew all of that. He knew who Christ was. He knew who he was. So this morning, do we know the answer to those two questions, or are we taking someone else's word for it, over what our conviction says, like Pilate was, or do we know who Christ was? Let's close in Matthew chapter 16. Because Christ asked this question himself. Just as the disciples started off opening text, who is this man? Christ asked them that same question. Well, who do you say that I am? After hearing the opinions of the crowd, after hearing what others had to say, who do you say that I am? Matthew 16:13. When Jesus came into the coast of Philippi, he asked his disciples, saying, "Whom do men say that I, the Son of Man, am?" And they said, "Some say that thou art John the Baptist, some Elias, and others Jeremiah, or one of the prophets." He saith unto them, "But whom say ye that I am?" And Simon Peter answered and said, "Thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God." And Jesus answered and said unto him, "Blessed art thou, Simon Bar-Jonah, for flesh and blood hath not revealed it unto thee, but my Father which is in heaven." You cannot live on somebody else's faith. You cannot live on who somebody else says, "Well, what do you think about this, and what do you think about that?" Or we get so caught up in everything. We need to know who Christ is to us. Stop chasing the deep questions. Well, what does this verse mean? There is a lot of deep verses. There are more verses in the Bible that I don't know what they mean than there are verses I do know what they mean. I have so much more to learn. I don't know all the answers. I don't know much, but I don't have to know much. All I have to know is who Christ is and who I am. Amen. And not be like Pilate. It's like, well, I know who he is, but everyone else says he's this, so I better do what everybody else says. We're going to answer for who Christ is to us. And who do we say that he is to us? Who do we tell others? How many times do we end up in our notice everything? There's a lot in what we've read through this morning. Philip didn't argue. The woman at the well didn't argue. All they said was come see for yourself. Don't be afraid just to introduce someone to Christ and let Christ tell them who he is. Christ is better than us. Amen. Christ can talk to their heart. All we can talk to is their arguments. Christ can touch their hearts. So again, who is Christ to us? And ask others to determine who Christ is to them. As we prepare for a verse of a song this morning, who is